A couple of months ago, I made a video explaining how I was upgrading my home's network to support what I thought were some of the fastest available broadband speeds, at least here in the UK, up to 5 gigabits per second, and how I was humbled. But whilst that video touched the products I used in the upgrade, I had quite a few requests to explain how to actually build out a system from scratch. And since UniFi has gone from a pretty niche IT thing to pretty much one of the best consumer and even small business networking ecosystems on the planet. It's like one that touches on everything from the typical routers, switches, Wi-Fi products, through to security and storage, even doorbells, and a product that makes traveling so much better. So this video is going to explain which products to buy and why, as well as show you how to piece it all together so you can kind of copy and paste what you need on your own home or even small businesses, no matter what your needs are. Now, a quick bit of context before we do dive in. In a previous life, I actually ran my own IT support business, so I have been deploying networks like this for many years, and that includes running a full UniFi home network myself. So when I say I know this stuff, I genuinely do this every single day. Now, this guide is primarily aimed at home users, but I will flag where things scale a bit beyond that because I know quite a few of you, work from home, own a small business, or perhaps just are into your tech and either want or maybe need to go that little bit further sometimes. And yes, I am going to miss some things here because UniFi have just got so many products that it is difficult not to miss certain things off. So I'm just going to focus on what products I basically tell anybody who asks me to buy which ones they should buy. Starting with the first thing, and that is the router or router for my American friends. Now, in UniFi's world, the cloud gateway is the router. It handles your internet connection, just manages your whole network, runs the security features, and depending on which one you buy, it can also host cameras, network attached storage, and just pretty much everything else. Now, those of you who just want an all-in-one box that takes care of everything, your internet connection, Wi-Fi, a little switch on the back, the most basic level here, then there is the Dream Router line, which packages just all this together in one box. But these are fairly limited in terms of expandability. They support only one 4K camera, although you can add additional wireless access points if you wish. So really, you want to start off with their Cloud Gateway range of products. Now, at the entry level, the Cloud Gateway Ultra is a solid basic router if your broadband is under 1 gigabit per second and you're not adding cameras. But for most people, my recommendation would be the Cloud Gateway Fiber or Max products, with the main difference being that the Max runs up to 2.5 gigabits per second and the Fiber up to 10 gig per second. Although, just a point to note here, if you want to enable some of the additional security features, they will then have an impact on those speeds. But as a rule of thumb, if your internet speed is less than 2.5 gig, get the Max, unless you want to future-proof and spend the extra money now, of course, because we're in a strange time right now where tech products are actually going up in value, kind of like used cars did in 2020. Now, both of these products have an M.2 slot to add storage for your cameras if you want to add those on. Otherwise, you can ignore that feature, but they both support up to 15 HD cameras or around 5 4K cameras. Now, stepping up beyond this, you get into their Dream Machine and rack mount territory. Now, generally speaking, these are for when you still want combined router, correct me, whatever I'm saying in the comments, and CCTV storage, but maybe want more cameras and maybe want to have a little home lab or something, maybe a tiny little rack for everything to go into. Ubiquiti make this really cool mini rack, which is so good for this sort of thing. Otherwise, outside of this, you are getting into the more enterprise territory in terms of features, and I could talk about intrusion prevention with the Pro Max capable of faster intrusion prevention and detection, and again, that's just getting a little bit more into the technical detail here versus this guide, which is more like a getting started guide. Now, the Dream Machine Pro and Pro Max are 1U rack devices, with the difference being that the Pro Max supports up to 15 4K cameras versus 8 on the Pro, and that's versus 5 on the Cloud Gateway Fiber. Now, both of these also get the options for adding additional storage from 1 hard drive to 2 hard drives and a built-in SSD. And both of these have a number of 1 gig Ethernet ports, although they aren't powered Ethernet, so not that helpful if you did want to extend your network with additional wireless access points or cameras, but more on that in just a moment. Now, I would say that for most home users, you won't need this one, but if you are watching this video, then chances are you might be interested in a bit more than just the basic side of things, in which case the Pro and the Pro Max are both solid options. Now, installation for your first gateway or router, if this is your first time installing a UniFi product, pretty straightforward. You simply power it on, you fire up the UniFi app on your phone, you can also do it via browser, where your UniFi product will appear and then just run you through this quick wizard getting started guide to get you started. Now here you will sign in, give your network a name, set up your broadband credentials, and depending on the product, even set up your basic Wi-Fi network. Then, once it's set up, you can carry on via your phone, or again, go to unifi.ui.com/consoles to get to the web dashboard, which I just find a little bit easier if you want to dig into some of those deeper settings. Things like creating additional wireless networks for visitors, or maybe some of the IoT devices needed their own 2.4 gig network. You can also enable things like the content filter to filter your kids' devices from dodgy content, and force safe search on places like Google and Bing and YouTube. Speaking of protecting your family online, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Incogni. Now, because we can lock down our networks with content filters and safe search and all the other usual things, but there is a whole other side to this that more people don't think about. Your personal information, your name, address, your phone number, even family members' information. It is all being bought and sold right now on hundreds of data broker sites that you've never even heard of. Now, Incogni is the solution here. So you sign up, you authorize them once, and then they go off and remove your data from hundreds of these brokers automatically. And they do this repeatedly because even if you do it once, that data can then resurface and then be sold all over again unless you have something like Incogni to stay on top of it. A feature that's worth talking about here is custom removals on the unlimited plan. Now, if you spot your info anywhere online, dodgy people search sites, an old directory, even AI search results, you just send Incogni the link and a dedicated privacy expert handles this for you. They are independently verified by Deloitte, and there is a 30-day money-back guarantee, so it's completely risk-free to try. Now use the code PETE or visit the link in the description to get 60% off the annual plans, because, well, they can't harm you if they can't find you. Now, once you have your router, the next thing you want to look at is adding a switch, or maybe multiple switches, depending on how many devices you want to wire into your network. So there are a few key things to understand first about your own needs here. First one is, how many ports do you need? Then where do those ports need to be? How fast do those ports need to be? And do any of those ports need to also provide power to other devices? So we're gonna take these questions one by one. Now, how many ports you need is a relatively easy one. Just look at what needs wiring into your network. You might have a mixture of various hubs like Philips Hue and Homey Pro, IKEA, and so on. But also, if you are connecting any additional network devices like wireless access points, other switches, maybe you want to run one cable to another room in your house and then have another switch there to hook up your PlayStation and your TV and all your other bits. And maybe you want to add some storage. Just a word of advice here. Always make sure you have more than you currently need. And now typically switches come in 4, 8, 16, 24 and 48 port sizes. So I just suggest you go for a size up from what you currently need. Now, where do these ports need to be is the next one, because maybe you only actually need a few ports right back to where your internet comes in. So a small switch there will work, but maybe you have an area where you do actually need 8 or maybe even more wired ports. You just map that out around your home. So now you know how many switches you need and how many ports on each of those switches you need. How fast those ports need to be is the next one. Now, as a general rule of thumb, if your internet is slower than 1 gigabit, then realistically, even the cheapest UniFi switches will be fine. But before you head to the comment section, if that is the case, but you have anything else on your network that can operate at faster than a gigabit, or you want the ability to send files between devices at faster than 1 gig, then you might want maybe some or maybe all of your switches to support those faster speeds, also keeping in mind that kind of upgradability and future-proofing that I mentioned before. Now that might be 2.5 gig, which a lot of PCs and hubs and even monitors include nowadays, or that might be 10 gig, which is more common with things like network storage. But you can also get wireless access points that support those 2.5 gig and 10 gig speeds, which I'll talk about more in just a second. Now, you should also think about future-proofing. Like I mentioned, if you're buying all this new kit and maybe you have the budget, then maybe go slightly bigger than you need right now. So in the future, you don't need to buy those products again, but the faster versions. And then, do any of these ports need to also provide power to other devices? Now, if no, you can just jump ahead to this timestamp. But otherwise, this might sound unusual, but it is quite common for things like wireless access points to be powered by the network port. So both data and power go over one wire, which just makes it so much easier if you want to run, extra cables around your house without worrying about also providing power sockets too. You can also power some of UniFi's smaller switches via Ethernet, which I have in a few areas in my own house, and not because there isn't any power nearby, but because if I do have a power cut, then my one central backup battery will still then keep most of my network up, even though the rest of the house is off. Now, doorbells can also be powered by Ethernet, but between other switches and CCTV cameras, those will be the ones that draw the most power. Now, with UniFi, they list 4 separate types. You've got PoE, which stands for power over Ethernet and runs up to 15 watts per port. PoE Plus, which is up to 30 watts. PoE Plus Plus, which is up to 60 watts. And PoE Plus Plus Plus, which is up to 100 watts. So just look at the devices you are connecting in to determine the type of PoE that you need. For example, I have 2.5 gigabit internet at home. I have one cable going from where my internet comes in to my man cave room thing, which has all my Xbox and PlayStation, gaming PC, my NAS, and also a wireless access point. So I need a 2.5 gig PoE plus capable switch next to where my internet comes in, and then a flex 2.5 gig PoE switch in my man cave because that switch is powered via that 2.5 gig PoE plus switch. And then I have 2.5 gigabits to things like my PC to make any downloads I do super fast. It powers my wireless access point, and then all my other things like consoles and TV and all that kind of stuff can go at whatever maximum speed that they can get. Now, I am going to highlight a few of my favorite switches, I guess if you call that, just to kind of get you started here. Now, the flex switches are super flexible, I guess, is per the name, but they're really small, basic switches that can be powered via Ethernet and can also run up to 2.5 gigabit speeds. So I actually have one of these right out in my back garden. And even though that is powered via PoE, it can also power other things via PoE. So I have a camera and a wireless access point also covering the garden, all from that single very, very long run cable that I run to the back of my garden. Then there are the standard Pro Max and Pro XG switches, which don't have any power over Ethernet. They're just standard gigabit and higher speed switches. Now these can give you those high 2.5 gig, 10 gig, and even higher speeds, but without the added cost of including power over Ethernet. And then at the highest, I guess, end before you head into enterprise world, you have their Pro XG PoE line, which gives you kind of everything like PoE plus power, mixture of 10 and 2.5 gigabit ports. Again, using my home network as a fairly extreme example, I guess, I have a Pro XG 24 PoE in my central rack, and that then gives me the fastest 10 gigabit speeds where I need them, as well as powering everything around the home, like other switches, other cameras, doorbells, and so on. Now, the great news about adding switches and really any UniFi product onto your network is just how easy it is to add them and adopt them onto your network. So you simply plug in your new switch, power it on, head into your UniFi console, and that new device will appear for you to adopt into your network. And this doesn't matter whether it's a switch, a wireless access point, a NAS, or a camera. Everything shows in here, and at pretty much the click of a button, it just becomes part of your network. And with all the settings and configuration and stuff within this window, for example, if you're adding an access point, you literally click one button to adopt, and it just automatically adds all of the configuration and wireless networks and everything onto that access point. You have to do literally nothing apart from click one button. It is just one of the most powerful parts of this ecosystem with just how simple, how easy, and just integrated it all is. So I won't explain how to add and configure every product because it really is very intuitive once you've adopted them. Now I will show you as we build out our UniFi network here in the studio, as well as my home network to demonstrate as well. But of course, if you do have any questions, do leave a comment down below. We'll do our best to reply to, anything we can to help you. Wi-Fi is up next. Now this is the big thing that everyone notices and potentially struggles with, getting the fastest Wi-Fi speeds and to all the areas that you need it. Now the good news is that as far as I'm concerned, and for the people watching this video, it is a pretty simple decision. Buy the U7 Pro XG if you want the absolute best speed and coverage, or maybe the U7 Pro if you don't have above gigabit internet speeds, the U7 Lite for filling in any dead spots around your house, and things like the U7 Outdoor for, well, outdoors. Although I am still using the older U6 Mesh for my outdoor areas, I probably should upgrade. Now there are plenty of other options if you want to dig into the weeds here. They make access points designed to specifically fit into wall boxes, as well as to bridge wirelessly between two places over pretty significant distances without needing to run a cable. But again, for most people, the few I've mentioned there will have you covered. And if you aren't sure how many you need, I would recommend just starting with one and seeing how well that does. I used to have like 6 access points all around my house because of its like really thick walls, and ended up needing only half as many of these U7 Pro XGs. And whilst I'm here, yes, you could get away with not running cables to everything in your home. You could wirelessly mesh access points to extend its reach, providing, you power them via another means. Maybe you could use those like power line or home plug adapters to extend your wide network, but it will pretty much always be better if you can run a physical cable, like way more reliable, way faster. Even, yes, if there is some cost to get someone in to run those cables for you around your home or business. And again, when you are buying these wireless access points, just double check what they're being connected into. Like buying a top end, expensive one and then plugging it into one of the lower end switches will give you a very different experience than a high end switch. So just make sure you choose the right switches with the right speed and power that you will need to power everything. Now, let's talk about one of the other more compelling parts of the UniFi ecosystem, and that is UniFi Protect, which is their camera security platform, and one that is so much better than the likes of Ring and Nest and any other cloud-based camera system. Everything is stored locally, either on your gateway, your UNVR, which is your unified network video recorder. There is no subscription fee, there's no monthly cloud storage bill, no reliance on the internet, and no footage going to a server somewhere that you don't control. You pay for the hardware once, and that is it. And that, in today's day and age, is a big win in itself. Now, in your gateway, the Dream Router 7, the Cloud Gateway Max, the Cloud Gateway Fiber we have here, the Dream Machine Pro and the Dream Machine Pro Max, they all support this since they all support UniFi Protect natively on the hardware. All you need to do is add either an M.2 NVMe drive or on these kind of bigger models, a traditional hard drive, and they become your camera system. Totally simple. Now, if your router or gateway doesn't support Protect, or you need maybe more camera capacity, you can then buy a standalone device, starting with the Network Video Recorder Instant, which is a compact recorder that can support one hard drive and supports up to either 6 4K cameras or up to 15 HD cameras. And when I say 4K and HD, hopefully it's self-explanatory, but that's just, you can support more lower quality cameras or fewer higher quality cameras because of the amount of data they store. Now, this one is like a traditional system that can even output to a monitor for an always-on screen system. There's also a hard drive slot in the bottom here. We're currently replacing our studio one with this kind of new Ubiquiti system as well. Then above this one, you have the rack mount version of the Network Video Recorder, and that one supports up to 18 4K cameras along with up to 4 hard disk bays for storage. And then there are also other options above this, but again, that's stepping outside of what we're covering on this video. But generally speaking, wired CCTV systems like UniFi's are a solid choice. They're not susceptible to people waving packages at your doorsteps to interfere with your Wi-Fi cameras. And UniFi's system also includes a ton of useful features such as face, number plate recognition, intelligently tracking and recording, as well as customizable notifications, motion zones, so much more. Now onto the cameras themselves. UniFi's current flagship camera range is their G6 series, and these are just genuinely excellent. You've got shapes and sizes to kind of fit all your needs, from something as affordable as their wireless G6 instant cameras to their, incredibly expensive, but also incredibly good AI DSLR and PTZ cameras. Doorbells also come into play here. I've actually had their PoE wired doorbell for the last year or more now, I think, and not once have I had to worry about the issue I always used to have with my wireless Ring doorbell, which used to struggle to connect on Wi-Fi, even though it was right in the middle of the Wi-Fi hotspot zone. Now, my recommendations for today would be for the top of the line, I would pick up either their G G6 or G6 Pro turrets for outdoors. They're domes for areas where you need to be vandal-proof, I guess. And then the G6 PTZ for a single great quality pan, tilt, and zoom camera that can also automatically track and even zoom in on, suspicious activity, I guess, when it sees it. And then if your budget can't stretch to that, because some of those are pretty nice, but very expensive cameras, you can also go for their previous generation G5 cameras. Just look out for their recommendations around the nighttime distance that needs covering to make sure you get one that's suitable. And also, not all of those support the AI features with like recognizing faces and number plates and those kind of things. And remember, there is no cloud processing, no extra subscription, loads of cool features like setting up face recognition for your family and maybe your car's registration. And then on Protect, it can notify you instantly when it sees someone new at the door or like an unknown car pulling into the driveway. That is just genuinely useful for like home security. Now, going back to earlier in this video, the main thing to consider here are the power requirements for each camera. So make sure you know which cameras require basic PoE and which require a little bit more, so you buy the correct switch to power them. But if you do happen to have a non-PoE powered switch, then you can also buy something called a PoE injector, which you plug into the mains and then pass through the network cable, and it will inject that power into the network cable, so then you can then power that camera off of the network. So there are workarounds if you don't have a suitable switch nearby already. Adding on to the UniFi ecosystem is their semi-recent addition of their NAS products. And for a first generation of products, it's actually pretty good. You've got options for both desktop and rack mount, depending on the amount of data you want to store. You get all of the usual features like file sharing over your network, RAID configuration to combine multiple disks for vast amounts of storage, as well as to protect against disk failures. There are some areas which are currently quite limited when you compare it to maybe a more mature product like the Synology products. Things like backups and syncing to Google Drive and backing up your mobile phone's photos aren't as well implemented here on the UNAS. But if you need a basic and fast storage system, one that fits with the rest of the whole like shiny silver cabinet rack mount gear stuff, then it fits right in and it will do a great job. Now you have the UNAS 2, which runs from 2 hard drives with RAID 1, which mirrors both drives for data protection, to up to 4 drives plus 2 M.2 NVMe drives in the UNAS 4, which then supports RAID 5, 6, and 10 for kind of better data protection. Now they are both powered via PoE, which is pretty unusual for a NAS product, but do come with a PoE++ adapter included. They also have a 2.5 gig Ethernet port. They're very small, very tidy. It can kind of sit literally anywhere you can run an Ethernet cable to. Great for some, basic home storage, media libraries, and just backups in general. But jumping to the top of the range, and you've got the UNAS Pro 8. Now this is a rack mount unit, 8 drive bays, 2 M.2 NVMe slots for caching, 4-core ARM processor, 16 gig of RAM, 3 10 gig Ethernet ports, and then an optional redundant power supply. So this is for like serious home users with large media collections, maybe content creators like us here, or maybe small businesses needing local file sharing at speed, who needs the flexibility of, a ton of storage here. You slap in 8 24 terabyte drives, if you have that sort of money in today's AI era. And in RAID 5, you will have a whopping 158 gigabytes of space. Just make sure you factor in the price of the disks when purchasing any of these NAS products, because that very much so is the most expensive part right now. There is also the M.2 NVMe drives, which you can use for caching the data for speedier file access. Again, optional extra. You need to buy the storage for that as well. And then we have the other UniFi products, which really just finish everything off. You've got the UniFi UPS tower and the UPS 2U, which is a rack mount UPS. Just keeps all your network online when the power goes out. All again integrated within the UniFi app. So you can see battery level, estimated runtime, get alerts from the same interface that you manage just everything else in. And I'm going to call this one out separately as well. Now this is the UniFi Travel Router, or Router again, never gonna get old that one. And this thing is an ultra thin device, a little bit bigger and thicker than, say, a credit card, that you can carry with you. And with this, you can either plug it into or wirelessly connect to things like hotel or maybe airplane Wi-Fi, and it will connect and then broadcast your home network and even tunnel all the way back to your home network, all securely, so anything you do on that public Wi-Fi is actually happening back on your home network. It's also a pretty great way to share paid Wi-Fi to multiple devices. Honestly, this is like a must-have for me on any flights I go on. I just plug it into the plane's USB port, connect it to the Wi-Fi, pay their insane rates for one flight. But now all of my devices immediately work without me needing to jump through like hoops or pay for multiple devices. They all just think they're all operating on my home network. And this was also great when traveling with my family too. Just plug it in, all of my kids' tablets and everything just works, whilst I also then know they're all still secure, still protected, still being filtered and everything like we have set up for our home network. And then we have the bits that most people forget about, but is massively underrated, because the right accessories turn this mess of boxes and cables, whatever it's the desktop versions or the rack mount versions, into something that can look absolutely flawless if done properly. I'm still working on this in my home network right now. Now you have the mini rack, which is Ubiquiti's answer to the question of, I kind of want a proper rack, but I don't want a full, like, big, full height cabinet thing in my living room. Now this one is a 6U open frame rack on lockable casters. Got toolless assembly, and you can stack multiple ones on top of each other if you want to do that. But it is small enough to sit in a cupboard or under a desk or maybe in a corner. Now with my background, I'm used to this big old industrial racks, but generally I prefer these. They're small, they look pretty cute, and if you spend the time, make you look like you've got your shit together. And before you say anything, yes, I am working on tidying my home one up. I'm just waiting to replace a fuse board before I then go ham with like tidying it all up again. I bought all the stuff, I'm just waiting. So if you think you need more than, maybe a desktop router and a switch, then this is a solid way to go that lets you make your rack mount, like router, switch, NAS, and all the other products look just organized AF. With that said, not everything fits. Something I came across whilst making this video is the USW Pro Max switches don't fit into the mini rack. The USW 16 Pro Max that I have has a rack mount kit that I fitted here that is available to buy from UniFi, but that is for a traditional rack because it has these like ears on the side here, not for UniFi's own rack, which is a little bit frustrating, but is, I guess, what it is. And then you have the even smaller details. Now you might have noticed on some switches, each port has a little LED strip around it, and that is called Etherlighting, not sure how you pronounce that either, comment down below. And what it does is color code each port based on what's plugged in. You can have different colors for different networks, different colors for different speeds. If you want all your IoT devices on red, and main computers on white, guest network on blue, you can set this up in the UniFi app, and the switch literally shows you what is what at a glance. And whilst we're talking about this, there is an awesome feature in UniFi where you can download the UniFi Design app and you can use augmented reality to visibly see what devices are connected to ports on supported devices, which is so cool. And for those ports, UniFi makes these super thin patch cables specifically designed to work with those switches with these transparent boots on the end. So the light from that switch port shines through the cable boot and lights up the whole thing instead of just this, blinking small LED. In a mini rack, it just looks incredible. So that was the UniFi Cinematic Universe. Links to everything again will be in the description down below. Again, any questions you have, please do ask them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, bye-bye.